Disclaimer. This video will include some conversation of homophobia, as well as book 1 through 3 spoilers. So if either of those things are reasons that you don't want to watch the video, go ahead and leave now and you can come back later or not at all. Hey! Alright, so I say we go over the first little bit, the kind of mirrored writing of Infinity Train. Book 1 starts with Tulip, in which we see that her parents are going through something that she is having a hard time accepting. The main kind of essence of it, in a large sense, is the inability to kind of accept forms of change. The reason I point this out from a larger scale perspective is time and time again we see Tulip go through that kind of experience, and we see that directly contrasted in book 2. But first, let me go a little bit over that. We see that the kind of binary way of thinking that Tulip has in smaller things, like the subtlety of obviously having somebody who thinks in a binary kind of way, being a coder and being interested in coding, as well as like more larger scale things like how we see the way that she tackles her parents' divorce and how that kind of immediately gives her a lot of stress and strain. That kind of immediate showing of that fear of change and fear of things not following a kind of set of rules is important to recognize, because it is, once again, as stated before, the opposite of Lake's entire experience. I mean, it's not exactly hard to see the kind of mirrored writing style when you pay attention to some of the details, such as, for example, the fact that Lake's name before they get the name Lake is MT a la Mirror Tulip, and we see how the story explicitly goes over the exact opposite. Lake's entire storyline is based around the concept, or conception, essentially, that Lake already knows who they are and what they want and who they want to be, whereas the world around them seeks to change them, versus Tulip, who thinks the world should be a way and seeks to change it. Lake's story is kind of an opposite contrast to what Tulip's is in many senses. Tulip is a person who has a way of thinking the world should be and tries to form the world around that idea. We have stuff like, for example, seeing Tulip look at the number on her hand and believe that instantly there needs to be some sort of game-like connotation to it, that each thing has to be tied to a car or a form of behavior, constantly trying to figure out why something works the way it does, and then immediately take that and put it to association with everything else.
It was 1:15 before. Oh, no. Did I do something wrong? Did I lose the points? Am I being timed?
I've seen that happen before. When it reaches 0, you are gone.
You're gone forever!
I was talking.
That's it? Nobody told me this number was gonna change. Nobody said anything. Now I'm gonna die on this stupid train because there isn't a stupid rule book.
Versus, say, Lake, who we see not be bothered by, say, a number at all, but literally the opposite in a sense in terms of that general way of thinking. I mean, besides kind of like smaller trans metaphors for Lake that kind of exist to the point where you'll see videos titled Lake being trans for 16 minutes on YouTube, Lake is a character that doesn't follow a type of binary rule set to the way that they think and already kind of knows who they are. And instead of Tulip's adventure of having to learn to understand and adapt to other people's changes and understanding that the world changes consistently and you need to learn how to grasp and deal with that, instead you see Lake already know who they are, how they already know how to grasp and deal with themselves, but instead they have to fight for the person they are and make sure that people don't change them. Tulip's way of thinking is almost able to be characterized closely to the ones who actually chase and pursue Lake in that manner, in the sense that they have an idea of what Lake's role is, trying to force Lake into the role of a typical denizen on the train that they don't want to fulfill. And that's similar, once again, somewhat echoed by the fact that Tulip, even at the start of the series, has bugs that they need to work out and stuff like their games and so on, trying to move things into the place that they're supposedly meant to belong in. So it deliberately goes out of its way to show both perspectives on that manner and how it could be handled in two different ways, and how both sides of that can be right in their own regard. By the end, we see that Tulip has to learn to accept that change and the different people's changes, but I'm just saying that they have to fight things in a kind of inverse way. It deliberately shows the other perspective of that, and whereas its message kind of remains the same, that accepting and adapting to change is a good thing overall, it also shows that if people want you to change, it doesn't mean that you should necessarily. It can be good to take the advice and the words of others and being able to accept the changes that are going to always happen in your life, but it's also important to recognize when you don't need to change for the sake of other people. So, why do I mention all of this? Because we notice that in book 4, the two characters are interlockingly connected, and in Book 3, we have two characters who are interlockingly connected. Now, companionships are nothing new to Infinity Train, but in Book 3, we deliberately see that Grace and Simon are connected very, very closely from an even and young age. And their story is closely tied with the fact that they're slowly growing apart. They have been friends for a long amount of time, since they were children, but they finally come to a point where they start meeting a type of impasse. And I could go into the depth of each of these characters and these relationships, but I'm trying to be somewhat brief about it. But if I had to very loosely strap together one of the main core themes of that arc, it is growing apart. People who are willing to change and people who are unwilling to change, and the kind of structural disruption that might cause. Their relationship being slowly turned more and more negative between the two of them, I think might be an opposite towards what we might see between Ryan and Mingy. To be clear, once again, it's very possible that it's not the same kind of mirrored format. As I mentioned before, the person before was literally named Mirror Tulip, but I feel like there is a type of symmetrical design to this in a sense. I feel like it's fair to believe, as we saw the changes between Grace and Simon's relationship as it molded apart, we might see the exact opposite between Ryan and Mingy, as we see very clearly from the trailer that we got, and now kind of a little bit of a glimpse from a clip that recently released at the time of this recording, that their relationship was kind of becoming separated. And instead of it being a story about how two very close people might be growing apart, I find it interesting to posit that maybe it's about two people who have kind of broken away from each other, growing back together. Now, of course, Infinity Train has not been a story so far that has been very explicit in how it handles its relationships. Grace and Simon, for example, were originally planned to have a kiss shared between them in one of the scenes. That was taken out later by one of the animators. This is also another reason I'd like to posit, because their relationship, if this is to be true, the kind of mirrored, structured writing of Infinity Train, the relationship between those two was romantic. Even if not shown on screen, it was planned for it to be romantic. So it's very possible that this could be the same. Hi, camera died as well as the audio broke, so I'm just gonna have to re-record this little bit. Basically, what I was going to get at is that every single book has some way of tackling with a number, but in a different way. Tulip has to try and figure out their number, try to understand it, and try to relate it to a problem. Lake doesn't have a number, and that creates a lot of problems for them, but both of those things are isolated into individual issues. Whereas we see with Grace and Simon's numbers, they're interlockingly connected in some way, at least initially. Both of them are constantly trying to overtake each other, and as we know, the higher the number, worse the person is, typically is how the train tends to run. It somewhat is symbolic for their cycle of abuse. Grace causes Simon damaging mental trauma that fucks him over, and then Simon causes Grace terrible mental trauma that fucks her over, and we see that kind of repeat over and over and over again in this continuous toxic relationship that has been going on for years before we even see it. This is somewhat symbolized even near the end, where we see between the two, the numbers disparity has gotten absolutely wild as they get farther and farther apart. Every time that they get a little bit farther away from each other, Grace's number goes down and Simon's number keeps going up, instead of them constantly overtaking each other. Grace is breaking the cycle of abuse, leaving, and as that is growing, it's growing not only between them, but in their number. You might be seeing where I'm going with this, since a big thing that everyone's bringing up in Book 4 is the fact that their numbers are interlaced, or exactly the same. I think we might be seeing something very similar with a kind of numeric theme, but since their numbers are exactly the same and start at a lower notation and they're not trying to overtake each other, I think it is trying to show off their unison and how they need to come together as a unison. For them to leave the train, they both need to process their issue, or else neither of them are going to be able to leave. One more thing that I forgot to mention in the video that I cannot believe I forgot to mention: the Adventure Time Obsidian came out on HBO Max, and that is very explicitly LGBT, which I think gives more weight to the idea that this could very well be romantic, especially if they're going to choose one anthology to make their last season. I could genuinely believe that they would go for something gayer in that sense. Companies look at what do numbers, and Obsidian was an explicitly lesbian story that, well, was very positively received. I sadly don't have the view count numbers for it. I assume they're not amazingly high, but for HBO Max, they're probably pretty good. And the rating on multiple websites typically breaches at least a 9. So I think that alone says a lot for kind of the success of that. And of all media production companies are likely to let that one go through. Anyway, section 2. Okay, so maybe an analysis of the structure of Infinity Train's typical story building patterns isn't enough to convince you of something like this. And that's completely fair. I also need more evidence than that, and to be completely frank, it's not like it's 1-to-1 ratio. I'm not gonna Pat game theory this full Hail Mary, chuck the football 30 full yards, believing that Sans is Ness or some shit. Like, I understand fully that I could be wrong. That being said, there is more evidence to it, which is why I feel like over time I've become more and more confident within the idea. I also am skeptical, of course, but with the extra little chunks, I think you can kind of see the cohesive paint. So I'm gonna go over those briefly, and we're just gonna smack them out. Side reasoning number 1, it's the 70s. The 70s were a time infamous for rampant homophobia, to which particularly rock stars were shown, or at least culturally seen, as people to kind of push against that. In fact, you even see Ryan wearing the famous David Bowie lightning bolt across his face, David Bowie being a massive spearhead during the period, pushing for gay rights and pushing for, I mean, just the fact that it... Like men.
Hold on, pause real quick. Something that I forgot to mention during this part of the recording is the reason that this theory has some sense of water is because we can connect stuff like Amelia's backstory to feminist movements back during the time as well as misogyny we see her face in subtle ways throughout her backstory. Infinity Train shows it's willing to tackle subjects related to progressive history. It's just easy to miss potentially because it is subtler. So you'll see stuff like Amelia getting denied the ability to be creative like her male counterpart and stuff relating. I'm not going to go into it too in depth in this video since that's not entirely what this video is about, but there's a great video on it that I'll link in the description. I'll show it right here if you want to just look it up. That goes over the whole thing quite well.
Reasoning number 2. In the clip that we saw recently that they uploaded to the HBO YouTube, I think it was HBO YouTube channel, it was basically an Infinity Train Book 4 clip. We see that homophobia might be stalked deeper into the ground between the characters, with stuff like Ryan, for example, deliberately cutting off Mingy when talking about family or anything relating. We already know, for example, that their numbers are connected. Perhaps this relates to it. I don't know about you. I cannot think of something much gayer than asking a man that you love to run away with you and join a rock band in the big city. There's no such thing as a bigger thing. Hey Jesse was a gay story that was overwritten. To help you contextualize this, because I understand that we haven't seen any like gay media ever, imagine like if a guy walked into a diner where a woman is working and asked her to run away with him to the big city to join a rock band. It seems kind of romantic, doesn't it? Yeah, kind of. Obviously this isn't like a one, like once again, none of this is 1-to-1 ratio, but I'm just saying that seems like a factor that I feel should be accounted for. This one's gonna be somewhat brief, so I'm just gonna go over this quickly. During the clip they released, on the ticket, it says that they are from a lake town or a lake city. Basically, it's just lake in the name of something. Infinity Train being a thing that likes to consistently call back to previous events as well as connect their characters through various themes and ideas. For example, Tulip and Amelia both being coders and finding difficulty accepting changes and that leading to them running away on a train. Stuff like that. I feel like that might be calling to reference the fact that Ryan and Mingy need to learn to accept their relationship and the change in that and learning to accept what they already are, the same way that Lake already accepts who they already are and has to fight against the world doing that. Showing the kind of internal and external storytelling that Infinity Train seems to have, where sometimes a character has to deal with a problem internally and understand a problem that they have internally and learn how to fix it, and the other half of the time, a character has to deal with a problem externally that is trying to stop them from being who they are internally, or at least from what we've seen. Since Grace and Simon's relationship seem to be very internally struggling, I think it might be more likely that Ryan and Mingy's relationship deal with an external problem, and that might be being called the reference from that little posit. This is all from me saying that one of the characters is named Lake and their story ends with a lake and the other one begins with a lake. So please take that with a grain of salt. This one's also stupid, and I'm just going to throw it out there for the sake of it. Infinity Train's main thing is infinity, which in case you forgot, the symbol for infinity is a infinitely going loop, kind of trying to show those sort of inverse attractions. I feel like potentially it is symbolic that the infinity symbol might be referencing how on the top portion, like even just in the Infinity Train logo, the top portion is the first person processing an idea or concept, and the other person is processing it in a different way, almost invertedly, such as the logo shows, with the top panel and the bottom panel being the ones that are consistently shown, showing that it starts with the initial and then ends with the inverse. That being said, once again, I could be overreading into it. I very much want the two men to be gay, and I can understand that my brain might be firing off a bit too much to try and figure that one out. Fifth reason, look at the way that they talk to each other. It's fucking gay. They're gay. They're homosexuals. I am telling you this. This isn't an acquisition anymore. I am telling you the fucking fact. Reason 5, these motherfuckers hold hands in one of the parts of the trailer. That's it. Fuck you. Number 6, I want them to be gay. Number 6, I'm driving myself fucking insane. I'm driving myself insane. I'm a fucking crazy person. Help! Help! Hey, I see you made it all the way to the end. Thanks a lot for watching my video. I appreciate it more than you probably could think I do. I guess this last little bit is just to say, obviously this is all just speculation, videos for fun, and so if it doesn't end up being that way, please don't attack any of the staff or anything. The character I'm playing up is a joke, and I'm not that crazed. That would be awesome. On top of that, if you want to sub to the channel, that'd be awesome. I don't upload that often, so I won't, clog your sub box, and there are more videos like this to come. If you like Infinity Train, I have more Infinity Train type videos planned. I also have a video in the works about Agretsuko as well as the Owl House. So if any of those pique your interest, stick around and have some fun. Also, don't watch my older videos if you're new to the channel, because they're not very good. Alright, have a good one. And if you're watching this at night, good night. I look forward to watching the new season with all of you, and I hope we can have cool discussions about it by the time that it's out and done. Alright, bye-bye.